What these hackers did inside a simple tax software update should be illegal. The code they hid inside it was designed for one thing only, and it was not to steal your money. You need to stick around until the end to find out why this hack was so much more intense than anyone could have possibly imagined. In the stillness of a midnight office somewhere in Ukraine, a single computer stirred to life. No human hand touched its keyboard, no sound broke the silence except the faint hum of the machine. It woke, opened a blank window, created a strange, nameless file, perf.c, and then went dark again. To anyone watching, it would have seemed insignificant, a ghost in the circuit. But by dawn, that tiny ripple would swell into a digital tsunami that would cripple an entire nation and send shockwaves through the world. Morning arrived like any other. The smell of coffee mingled with the chatter of office workers, laughter, keyboards, phones ringing ordinary sounds of ordinary people starting an ordinary day. Then, without warning, the screens around them blinked, flashed, and went black. When they returned, they showed a single message written in white letters on a red background. Oops, your files have been encrypted. A demand followed $300 worth of Bitcoin to unlock everything. But no amount of money would have made a difference. The offices fell silent, machines rebooted again and again, their data gone forever. Across Ukraine, the same scene unfolded. Fuel stations froze as their systems shut down. Hospitals couldn't access medical records. Banks failed to process payments. Power grids flickered, postal deliveries stopped, and ATMs went dark. Every corner of the country, from Kyiv to Odessa, sank into chaos. Within hours, an invisible weapon had paralyzed an entire nation, a weapon more devastating than any missile, more precise than any blast. It didn't destroy buildings or bridges, it destroyed the lifeblood of modern civilization information. The hack wasn't random. It was born from years of silent warfare. Since 2014, Ukraine had lived in the shadow of conflict. After a revolution toppled a corrupt government, Russia had moved swiftly to annex Crimea and ignite war in the east. But as the tension cooled, a new battlefield emerged, one made not of trenches, but of code. Ukraine's digital infrastructure became the testing ground for the future of war. 2 years before the catastrophe, hackers had already proven their power. In December 2015, 500,000 Ukrainians lost electricity when their power grid was sabotaged. The following year, Kiev went dark again. These weren't the acts of petty cybercriminal. They were precision strikes, operations requiring deep knowledge of electrical systems, executed by professionals who understood both the machines and the politics behind them. Experts knew it instantly. Only a nation state could do this, and there was little doubt which one. Russia had been experimenting with cyber warfare for years. In 2007, it had flooded Estonia's digital networks, paralyzing government websites and banks. In 2008, during the invasion of Georgia, it had used cyberattacks to complement its military strikes. By the mid-2010 seconds, cyber operations had become a quiet but worst extension of Russia's power, and the heart of this strategy was its military intelligence agency, the GRU. Once feared as the most ruthless organ of the Soviet Union, the GRU had faded into near obscurity after the collapse of the USSR. It was underfunded, disorganized, its reputation overshadowed by the newly polished FSB, but the war in Ukraine revived it. Faced with humiliation, the GRU reinvented itself through the shadows of cyberspace. It began recruiting hackers the best in Russia, not from dusty military academies, but from universities, tech hubs, and even criminal underworld. These new recruits were digital mercenaries, talented, reckless, and creative. They brought flair and chaos into military precision. Among them emerged a secret unit that left a peculiar calling card in its work, cryptic references to Dune, Frank Herbert's classic about power and empire. The cyber researchers who discovered these traces gave them a name that would become infamous: Sandworm. By the time 2017 arrived, Sandworm had refined its art. Their previous operations, the blackouts of 2015 and 2016, were just rehearsals. The main act was about to begin. The stage, Ukraine. The weapon, a digital explosive disguised as ordinary ransomware. The date, June 27, the eve of Ukraine's Constitution Day, when offices were busy, defenses were thin, and the symbolism of striking just before a national holiday would not be lost. The key to their plan lay inside a piece of software so mundane that no one would ever suspect it: a Ukrainian tax application called Medoc. Nearly every business in the country used it to file returns. That meant, through MEDOC, a path existed into almost every corporate network in Ukraine. Years earlier, Sandworm had infiltrated MEDOC's update servers through a simple phishing email. Hidden deep within the system, their backdoor waited patiently. When MEDOC pushed routine updates, those updates unknowingly carried a payload, the seeds of destruction. That morning, as workers chatted about their holiday plans, computers across the country downloaded a new MEDOC update. Inside was a worm later named NotPetya. At first glance, it looked like a variant of the Petya ransomware, a malicious program that encrypted a victim's files until a ransom was paid. But NotPetya was far worse. It was designed not to steal, but to annihilate. Once it infected a computer, it began spreading instantly through internal networks, using stolen tools so powerful they could have only come from one place, the US National Security Agency. Among them was Eternal Blue, an exploit that could leap from one machine to another by hijacking a Windows feature meant for file sharing. There was also Eternal Romance and Mimikatz, software that stole login credentials from memory. These were meant to be top secret cyber weapons, but a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers had leaked them to the world. Now, in Sandworm's hands, they became instruments of mass digital destruction. NotPetya infiltrated networks faster than any human could respond. It mapped out every connection, every password, every open door, and crawled through them like fire through dry grass. Within an hour, it would encrypt the entire system, transforming files into unreadable gibberish. Then it would rewrite the very core of the computer, the master boot record, ensuring the machine could never start again. When users tried to reboot, they were met with a fake repair screen that finished the job, sealing the device's fate. The ransom note that followed was a cruel joke. It promised recovery in exchange for Bitcoin, but the email address provided was dead, the decryption key non-existent. The payment demand was merely camouflage, an attempt to make this look like an ordinary criminal act rather than a military strike. There was never any intention of returning anyone's data. NotPetya was not ransomware. It was a wiper, built for one purpose: destruction. As screens went red across Ukraine, panic set in. Government agencies were locked out. Banks froze. Newsrooms went dark. Even the monitoring systems at Chernobyl's nuclear plant fell offline, forcing staff to record radiation levels by hand. From one infected update, a nation was brought to its knees, but it didn't stop there. The internet has no borders. Any company doing business in Ukraine, any firm that used MEDOC became collateral damage. Soon, giants like FedEx's TNT Express, Merck, Maersk, Mondelez International, Saint-Gobain, and Reckitt Benckiser saw their global networks collapse. At ports operated by Maersk, 17 of 76 terminals went silent, ships drifted at sea, unable to unload cargo, trucks idled, supply chains broke. For days, global trade faltered. A virus launched in Kiev rippled outward, paralyzing entire industries from Europe to America to Asia. Amid the wreckage, investigators noticed something strange. In a handful of infected networks, a few computers had survived. Every machine around them was dead, except those that contained a single file named perfc. That same file that had mysteriously appeared in a quiet Ukrainian office the night before, the man who uncovered the mystery was Amit Serper, a cybersecurity researcher at an Israeli firm called CyberReason. He was poring over the code when he noticed a peculiar command, a line instructing the virus to halt its operation if it found a file with a specific name. It was an unalive switch. Creating a blank read-only file called perfc in the Windows folder was enough to stop the worm cold. Serper tested his theory with colleagues around the world. The results were the same everywhere. Computers with perfc were immune. The discovery came too late to save Ukraine, but it revealed something vital about the mind behind the hack. This was not chaos for chaos's sake. It was precision engineered. The unalive switch raised haunting questions. Why include a self-destruct mechanism in a weapon meant to devastate? Some speculated that it was a safeguard, a way for the hackers to stop the infection if it escaped their control. But that theory quickly faltered when NotPetya struck Russia itself, crippling companies like the oil giant Rosneft. Others suspected something more sinister, that the perfc file was a vaccine planted deliberately on select machines, a way to spare key systems the hackers still needed for espionage. Cybersecurity experts, including Andy Greenberg, who later chronicled the events in his book Sandworm, suggested that NotPetya wasn't merely a blunt force strike. It was also a cover-up. By wiping entire networks, The hackers could erase traces of earlier intrusions, concealed data thefts, sabotage investigations, and preserve secret access to chosen systems. What looked like random carnage may have been the digital equivalent of torching a crime scene. As forensic teams across Ukraine sifted through the wreckage, they uncovered a chilling level of sophistication. The infection path from Medoc's servers through Eternal Blue into global corporate backbones was so seamless it resembled a military operation. Ukrainian police raided Medoc's offices and seized their servers. The drives were delivered in garbage bags, unencrypted and chaotic, but still intact enough for researchers to trace the first spark. Every clue pointed back to Sandworm, the GRU's invisible hand. Artem Mikhailov, a Ukrainian cybersecurity specialist, recalled the panic vividly. People couldn't buy food or fuel. Payment systems froze. Supermarkets shut their doors. He described the eerie silence that replaced the noise of daily life, the feeling of living inside a country where everything digital had simply stopped. It was, he said, a glimpse of the future no one wanted to see. The aftermath left scars far beyond Ukraine. Global losses exceeded $10 billion, the most expensive cyber attack in history. Companies that once dismissed cybersecurity as a minor concern were suddenly forced to rebuild entire systems from scratch. Governments began running war game exercises to prepare for digital disasters. The illusion that cyberspace was somehow separate from real-world conflict vanished forever. In the end, the weapon had succeeded beyond its creator's intentions. It crippled Ukraine, damaged allies, and even burned parts of Russia itself. It demonstrated that a single line of code, launched quietly from behind a keyboard, could inflict the kind of damage once reserved for bombs and blockades. The world's infrastructure, from shipping ports to hospitals, had become a battlefield, and no one could claim to be safe. For the researchers who lived through those days, the lessons were bitter. Amit Serpa remembered sitting in his parents' living room, still tracing the lines of code that had paralyzed half the planet, realizing how fragile the entire system was. Marcus Hutchins, the man who had stopped another global worm WannaCry days earlier, echoed the same thought. These colossal attacks weren't defeated by governments or supercomputers. They were stopped by individuals curious, underpaid researchers pressing buttons, driven by instinct more than policy. Humanity survived because a few people cared enough to look closer. And yet, one truth remained undeniable. The tools that made NotPetya possible, the stolen NSA exploits, were not Russian creations. They were American, designed in secret labs, built for espionage, then lost to the shadows. Once unleashed, they spread uncontrollably, empowering those they were meant to defend against. The weapon turned inward, devouring the system that birthed it. When historians look back on June 27, 2017, they will see more than just a cyber attack. They will see the day the digital world lost its innocence, the moment humanity learned that our greatest strength, interconnection, could also be our greatest vulnerability. The office that started it all is long gone now. The Perf-C file still sitting quietly in an archive somewhere, a relic of the night when the modern world caught a glimpse of its own fragility. No smoke, no blast, just silence, then darkness, then the realization that the future had already arrived. After witnessing how a silent line of code brought nations and corporations to their knees, do you think the world is truly ready for the next digital war? Was NotPetya an attack, a warning, or a test for something much bigger? Share your thoughts in the comments and make sure you follow for more shocking truths they don't want you to know.